Dennis, it is an honor to be speaking with you today about
Thanks,
this
George.
and smoke and your career in general. Very excited.
Awesome.
So I guess I want to start with something that you've probably talked about a couple times already, but in this series, you're writing about an author. Obviously, you're a great author and an acclaimed author. This guy's not, let's put it nicely.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about writing an author whose writing isn't always so good?
Well, we wanted to, it was all of us. We wanted to do this. We wanted to pay, it's a loving portrait in a lot of ways of that aspect. It's like we all start out there and we all think, oh my God, we're possessed with this incredible, need to tell a story. And some guy who wrote 10 pages today. And then we've all been that moment when somebody reads it and goes, no, it's good, And so in that way, Dave's stuff is very loving. I think that it starts as a very loving thing. And then we start getting into the fact that he's not very good at it. And then we get into the darker aspects of it. By the time we get into episode 4, I think you can see, you know, that he's doing the darker things that writers do, which is to say, nothing is as important to me as my work,
Mm.
and that becomes I think his wife says in the first episode, "You're gonna quit your day job?" Like a little nervous, And
Well,
I'll teach, and I'll be like, when I used to teach, and I run writers programs and stuff, and I'll be like, you might want to just get a handle on this ego maniacal part of it right now before you blow up your whole life and you're still 10 years away from publishing, you know?
so let me ask you because I think this is an interesting idea, and you're hinting at stuff that happens with this character that's
Yes.
fascinating, that goes beyond just this writing stuff, how
Thank you.
dark this story gets, and I want to talk about all of that. But when you talk about writing, do you believe, and you are incredibly talented and accomplished, do you believe that this is a muscle that someone like, let's say this guy goes down, would go down a different path than he does in this story, and he gets better at it? Do you think it's something people
Yeah.
can develop, or do you think it's talent to a certain extent is a blessed thing that you can't?
No, I think you have to have a talent. You have to have one aspect. So when I came in as a writer, when I started, one thing I knew, I had an ear. I had a very finely tuned ear for the ways people spoke. And so that's what I had. I didn't have anything else. I didn't have sentence construction. I didn't have plot. I wrote very minimalistically when I started. I didn't write, beautiful lyrical language. I had to learn all that. But you
Mm.
have to have one. It's like being a comedian. And nobody's ever told you you're funny. If nobody's ever told you you're a good storyteller, you might want to lean away from the writing thing. You know what I mean? It has to be one thing, but you don't have to be preternaturally talented or anything like that. I wasn't. Um,
But you
then,
built around the thing you had, which is interesting to hear because dialogue, even though there's dialogue in books, you've done so much in TV and movies where dialogue is a bigger part of the tale. So those other things, you kind of had to learn them initially, and then you go into a movie and a TV show where descriptive language is far less important maybe than
yes,
dialogue,
it
right?
is. It is. And that's funny because I find it so much easier to write scripts. Like, I just find the writing, the setting of the scene to be the hardest thing in the world for me in a novel. The hardest thing. Whereas in a script, it's just interior kitchen day. You're done. You're done. Your work's done. You don't have to tell everybody what the kitchen table looked like. Like, fuck
There's
it.
a whole team of people who are going to figure
Yeah,
that
yeah.
out.
Plenty of people are gonna figure that out. So, um, yeah, I think you play to your strength to start, and then the worst thing that happens to writers, I think, is ego. And I don't mean ego. Ego of the work is very important. You have to believe you have something to say, and you have to believe that this is the way to say it. But ego of the self, yourself, tying yourself up and your self-worth into this, and
Mm.
it's very, very destructive. And I
That
and I
is
find it has no place in a writer's room. That's the place where we just wash you out. If you come in there and this is about you, I'm going to smell you out real fast. And you're there for the show. And that's no different than I was when I started working for The Wire. I wasn't there.
that's
I didn't walk into the Wire room like I'm Dennis Lehane who wrote fucking Mystic River. I didn't do that. I walked in like I'm Dennis Lehane who would really like to learn how to do TV, and I have no idea how. and I parked my ego at the door. And that's
That's
super
great
important.
advice for anyone and anything, I think, but it's
Yeah,
definitely true. God, The Wire was so amazing, and you wrote on some amazing seasons.
I
I'm
did.
curious if, recently Idris Elba, I think, talked about how he hasn't seen it, which is kind of fascinating. And I
Mm.
wonder how you reflect on the experience. And then, do you and Dave, do you talk to David? Would you do more with him? Have you guys ever
We
collaborated
we
again?
we spoke we spoke years about 5 years ago about doing something together, but it didn't pan out. David and I speak when we need to speak to each other. I think I knew he had a house in New Orleans when I was moving to New Orleans for Blackbird, and I reached out to him about that. So we're totally in contact, but we're not like buddy buddies. We don't go out and they live there, I live here.
Mm,
So, but it's a good relationship, and he knows that I am always indebted to him and Ed Burns for really teaching me how to do it. I didn't know how to do it. And I learned watching them, and I learned by doing it, and I learned by failing at it, and I learned by the first episode that has my name on it. I probably wrote about 40% of what you see on the screen. The second episode, it was up at around 80%. The last episode, it was at about 95%. That's as far as you'll ever get. And then a showrunner has to, the showrunner is the coffee filter, is the way I put it. And
mm,
and you have to go through the filter. And I'm the filter for all my writers now. So the
yeah.
last pass will come through my filter. But in the
That's
case of, you'll see a writer on Smoke, Molly Miller, I would say about 90 to 95% of her stuff makes the screen.
when you worked on adapting a couple great Stephen King things, you did two, I think.
Mhm.
Um, I'm
I did
curious.
three. I did three.
Oh, three. Wow.
I did
Okay.
three. I did Mr. Mercedes. I did End of Watch as second season of Mr. Mercedes, and I did The Outsider.
Outsider. Yeah, I didn't. End of Watch is a good one.
Yep.
He's obviously great in his own right. What's it like working with his material? That's one other filter, kind of, right? And then you're a
Mhm.
filter for the
Yep.
show. And
Yep.
is there something of his you'd like to adapt in the future? And I'm just curious to
No,
hear
no
one
offense
great
to
author
Steve.
talk about another.
No offense to Steve, but he knows. I did three in a back to back to back. I was so submerged in horror. I just wanted out, man. I was like, if I could do a Steve, I would love to do one of the classics. I would love to go back and do, you know, Salem's Lot, but it's already been done twice, or Carrie, but that's being done right now by Mike Flanagan. So no, I don't think I'd do another Stephen King. I loved doing Mercedes. I absolutely loved it. And I told Steve early, I just said, I'm going to take care of your material. I am going to be absolutely faithful to the spirit. I understand what this is about, but you're going to have to leave me be. Not that he was knocking on my door. I was just like, but I'm going to go off and do it now, and you won't hear from me until it's done. And that's the only way to do it. But you, as a novelist to a novelist, you must respect the material. That's the spirit of the material, not the letter. You don't have to do everything exactly as it was supposed, as it happened in the book. But you should do, the theme should be the same. You know what I
Yeah, I
mean?
must
Like,
understand that as well. I got to ask about Smoke again because we've gotten on all these sidetracks
yeah,
there.
yeah, sure, sure. Yep.
Smoke is something that really unfurls, and people gotta find like I just anybody will love where it goes or there's so many layers.
Yep.
Working with Taron in this role, this is
Yeah.
a lot. Like I'm curious about if you could talk about the partnership and the evolution of it, and we don't want to do any spoilers, but I just would love to hear you speak about it because it's fascinating to watch, and you two have partnered before.
Yeah, well, when I came up, when it was brought to me, it was brought to me as a nonfiction piece. I wasn't interested in the nonfiction piece, but I was interested in the pathology of the main character
Mm.
in that nonfiction story. And I went to Taron. We were finishing Blackbird at the time, and I went to Taron in New Orleans, and I just said, "Look, I got this guy. I had this idea for this guy," and I pitched him the guy. And he was like, "Mate, that's it. I'm in. Like, I'm in." And I was just like, "All right." And then he went off and he did a bunch of movies, and I went off and built it. And every time he was in LA, he would come and either hang out with me or come once he came to the writer's room, and I would show him what we were doing, And he was just getting more and more excited. And then he started to see the scripts, and then he started to get really excited. And then when we got on the ground to shoot it, he had all these other wonderful ideas that he and I work really well together by we'll go, we'll jump off a cliff together, creatively speaking, and then we'll have to dial it all back. But we went nuts. Like there's a scene at the end of the fourth episode, which was already crazy when I wrote it. And then Taron was like, text me on the one weekend and he was like, mate, I got some really crazy ideas for this. And I was like, let's go. And we went nuts. And then we went to the point where we were scaring the shit out of Apple. And then we said, all right, we'll dial it back. We'll dial it back. And then we dialed it back. But even dialed back, it's an insane scene. And to put it in perspective, Taron said to me at one point, ever since I was a little kid, I always wanted to dance on screen to David Bowie. I said, well, let's do it. You know?
I love the partnership, and hearing more about it makes sense to me why it's so explosive, pun intended. Like it's just
Yeah.
something great is happening between the two of you, and it's fun to watch.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing is that we really trust each other to give each other a lot of rope and know that one or the other of us will drag the other one back in. Like that's the trick, you know? And
Mm.
so um that's where because a lot of people are rightfully terrified of their star. The star has a lot of power. But but I'm always like, don't worry about it. I got Taron. And I'll reach out to him and I'll just be like, hey, I think, they're a little worried about this aspect and I don't blame them. And he'll be like, I know, I was thinking about that, man. Absolutely. So then we dial it back. And
You are
that's
no stranger to being a muse or the dynamics. I mean, the talent that has come through your work, your characters,
it's
is like
crazy.
a crazy list. I don't know if you have reflections on that, but and like where he fits into it. But there's some great names, some greatest talent ever, really.
Well, yeah, but I didn't really. I mean, I worked a little bit with Sean Penn when we were doing Mystic River, and Kevin when we were doing Mystic River. I gave them backstory and stuff like that. I did a little of that with Leo on Shutter Island, but not a lot. It's different when you're running a show. So as a showrunner, I mean, my relationships, I love actors. They know it. They feel it. I respect what they do because I can't do it at all. I'm the worst actor in the world. I played myself on a show and I was unbelievable. So I love what the magic that they do. So I have a wonderful relationship with Taron. I have a wonderful relationship with Journey Smollett. I had an incredible relationship with Ray Liotta before he passed.
Yeah.
Um the one thing actors are really good at is smelling out BS. If you're full of it, they'll eat you alive. And I used to watch Ray do it, but not with me. And I think, we're all after a certain honesty and authenticity. That's the point. And again, we're back to ego. You can't have your ego or your vanity in the way of that.
Mm.
That's, you know, bottom line.
Thank you so much. I've gone over. I wish I
Oh,
could
sure,
keep going.
George. My pleasure, man.
Thank you for letting me go over, by the way. Have a great
Of
rest of your day.
course.
I really appreciated it. Good
Hey,
luck and
George, thanks a lot,
congratulations.
man. Be
Bye.
well.